All right, welcome to the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler, presented by Dick's Sporting Goods. Legs, how we doing, man?
I'm great, man. I had a great Father's Day weekend. It's nice to, in the midst of all of us in this industry being this busy this time of year, to get home for a couple days. And I had a great Father's Day, man. I couldn't have asked for anything more. Good beach day with the family.
I love that.
Had a great time.
That.
Yeah.
I also got to spend some time with my family yesterday for Father's Day, which was great. We real quick before we get into the finals. So my kids are coming to the game tomorrow, or my kids are coming to the game tonight, I should say, with my wife. And they came up yesterday afternoon. Kai had a semifinal game in his like rec league or whatever. So they flew up after I was already up here. And we went to the Red Sox Yankees game last night, which was great. You know, first time for them in Fenway, iconic place, and Aaron Judge, you know, it's a home run first inning over the Green Monster. So overall, it was a really nice experience. And then I had to go run a quick errand in the concessions for Knox and Kai. Kai wanted a hot dog. Knox wanted a pretzel. So I was in line for a while, and I come back up the ramp, and we were like row E in the field box, like kind of just to the right of home plate. And I'm like, why are there so many people standing at the top of the ramp? And then I was like, why are there paramedics in our section? And then as I got closer, I was like, why are the paramedics attending to my family?
Oh my goodness. What happened, man?
So I'm like, Kai's crying. Chelsea's like trying to hold back tears. Knox, by the way, is just like, I'll stay with this random woman who has mom's number. And I'm like, no, you're coming to the paramedics. So we went to the back, and apparently Aaron Judge hits this towering foul ball, and it looked like it was going to land like directly behind home plate. And I guess he hit it so high that the spin and the wind just kind of took it towards our section. And it would have been my seat. It was 4 seats in our row. It was me, Kai, Chelsea, Knox. And all of a sudden, Chelsea realizes the ball is going directly at Kai's head. And so she puts her left arm around Kai, and I think she broke her finger. We got to go get an x-ray, but it's likely broken. And ball hit ricocheted off Kai's shoulder, then hit this gentleman's knee. When I went back to get all Chelsea's stuff when she was back with the paramedics, he had like a giant bruise on his kneecap, and he was the third. He was the third hit. It was wild.
That's
it
crazy.
Was wild.
Man.
Not Aaron Judge's fault. It was more my fault for just being at the concession stand on Father's Day, not in a position to protect my family.
Hey, JJ, it might have been, you never know. It could have been a blessing in disguise, man. Because if that ball comes down and you're there and your dad and you got hands out, and that thing's got that much spin on it, okay, from that height, that's not the easiest thing to catch with your bare hands. And the last thing you need to do in front of your children is drop a potential Aaron Judge foul ball, right? Like a lifetime memory. That one, you'd probably get it signed by him, you know, the whole bit. So it might be better off, man, that it turned out the way it did.
What if I got hit in
no
the
major
face,
injuries? Yeah, right.
Broken nose, black eye. I gotta go call a finals game.
That's a wild story, man. That's crazy.
But it's just, it was so weird to come to the top of the ramp and be like, have that progression of thought, be like, oh no, the paramedics are attending to my family.
Yeah. Huh, that's interesting. What's going on down there?
Wow. All right. You know, let's just kind of get into game 5 tonight. But I think we should start sort of with game 4 and just sort of your overall thoughts on what was a dominant Dallas performance. And a very curious, I think, Boston performance.
Yeah, I mean, look, going into it, I felt like after they lost game 3, I felt like, you know, people were asking, what do you think is going to happen? Can Dallas get one? Of course they can get one. You know, and I thought they had a chance to win the series going into it. So yeah, of course they're good enough to win a game. But at that point, with Boston kind of having one hand around that trophy, and they've come so close so many times, I thought this team is going to be so laser focused tonight and trying to end this and get it over with. And, I also think that, the whole thing, hey, going 16-2 and having a clean sheet in the finals, I know that's something historic. They could really look at this postseason run historically with on top of the year they had in the regular season. I thought all of that stuff was playing into like why they would want to end it, to basically drop the mic on how dominant they have been over the rest of the league this year. So not surprised Dallas won the game, but the way it played out, JJ, of course. I mean, it basically a similar start to game 3. Dallas comes out, playing really well early, making shots. Kyrie and Luka both making shots early in the game. They get a double-digit lead fairly quickly. But in game 3, that game was a 1-point game by the end of the first quarter. And then eventually Boston hit him with that huge run in the third quarter to end the game. There was no run in this game. And what I felt like all along, when you're down 3-0, if you get a lead and then they come back and erase the lead, that's when it starts to, like, I think the weight of the entire moment would start to hit a team. Like, this is too much to overcome. And then they sort of, their energy, they get dispirited, and then Boston wins the game. But the problem is Boston never had that run. They never made Dallas doubt anything in that game. So I was surprised by just the appearance to me that it was not, I don't know, going through the motions might be a little bit strong. I mean, this is the NBA Finals, but you were sitting there courtside, so I'm curious to get your thoughts. Watching the game the way I was and ready to come on, after and break it down on SportsCenter, and like I'm ready to do my thing. That's what it looked like to me. It just looked like a team that was not remotely mentally where they needed to be at the start of the game. And then certainly by the time that thing got up to 10, 15 points, it just, Boston almost looked like, let's get this thing over with and let's get back home and close it out on our home floor. I mean, that's the appearance that they gave. And I don't want to take away anything from what Dallas did, because they played a great game. And it was probably their most complete game they've played in quite a while, because their stars played well. Their role players were great up and down the roster, which they have not really gotten in the same game in this series. So I don't want to take anything away from what they did, but this felt more to me about Boston than it did Dallas to this extent. I mean, how can you expect a team to be down 40 in a closeout game when they're up 3-0? It's insane. So I was just disappointed with Boston's concentration level. But look, you got 3 more games in hand if you're Boston, right? And 2 of those, if you need them, are in your building. So maybe there was a little bit of that complacency in the back of your mind, knowing that you've got this much cushion and margin for error in a particular game. I was surprised it got out of hand to the extent that it did.
Yes. You brought up the sort of historic nature of this Boston Celtics season. So they had a chance, if they had won, to go 80-20. And have a 800 win percentage regular season and playoffs. I think there's been like 12 teams, something like that, in NBA history that have done that. 16-2, of course, clean sheet in the conference finals, clean sheet in the finals. They still remain, and if they go on to win this championship, they will be remembered as, one of the most dominant teams relative to the league. In NBA history. You're not going to change that if they go on to win this championship. A couple things. So, I said on SportsCenter, and I know you saw this, but it was, I said it was a bad impersonation of the Celtics team that we've seen all season. Al Horford talked a little bit about how they've had a few games like this, not on this stage this season, obviously, not in a closeout game or a chance to go to the NBA finals or a chance to go to the conference finals. This was a chance to win a championship. And I think that was the surprising part. And he said, he felt like they didn't match the level of intensity and physicality that the game required. So to me, in some ways, yeah, that's all true about Boston. But the big thing for me is, if Dallas can contain the basketball like they did in game 4, they have a chance. They have a chance to win. In any game against this team, they have a chance to win. For 3 games, they could not stay in. And it wasn't, look, Luka's stuff, we saw the viral video. His blow-by numbers are not great. He was much better in game 4, but so was everyone else. Yeah. So was Lively. So was Kyrie. So was Derek Jones Jr. Like, Boston had a much tougher time creating advantages, creating 2-on-1s, getting Dallas in rotation. They just didn't feel like offensively they had their identity. And I would actually I would say that's more on Dallas playing stout defense than anything else. On the other end, it's like a reversal of what we saw. It was like we've praised for 3 games now their ability to contain the basketball. We praised for 3 games. They haven't given up corner threes. They haven't given up alley-oops. And they just got consistently broken down at the point of attack. Now, so to your point about in the back of your mind, I think there's human nature. In the same way there's human nature on Dallas' side where there's going to come up potentially tonight. But at some point in this series, you would think there's going to come a point where you say, do we let go of the rope or not? Right? And I think the reverse of that is, well, we still have got Game 5 Monday in our place back in Boston. And the psychology of that is really fascinating. It's really fascinating. But I look at one thing that we've seen now in this series, and Joe has talked about this throughout the year, but it was particularly striking in games 3 and 4 because you brought up the start. So Joe talks about the 8 segments of the game, right? Start of quarters, end of quarters. Game 3, Dallas won the start of the first quarter. By the end of the first quarter, Boston had won the close, and it was a close game. You go to game 4, Dallas wins the start of the first quarter. Derek White hits a 3 at the end of a shot clock to cut it to 28-21. Dallas then hits back-to-back threes. They're up 13. So Dallas wins the start of the end of the first quarter. Then Dallas wins the start of the second quarter. Then it's like a 20-something game. There's 3.5 minutes to go. And it's like, can Boston get this thing down to 15 before the start of the second half? No, they can't. They lose that segment too. It just like there was every time there was like any sort of chance for any momentum, Dallas just said, nah, we're good. We're just going to win this 3-minute, 4-minute segment to close out quarters, to start quarters, to close out halves. And for me tonight, if I'm looking at this and I'm Boston, we've got to get off to a good start. We can't keep playing from behind against Dallas.
And I think one of the ways to do that, JJ, because I totally agree with you. One of the ways to do that, I think that you're going to see a little bit more intent on the part of the Boston Celtics to try to prevent some of the favorable switches that Luka was getting early, because I think that's the best way for Dallas to settle in and feel comfortable. If he comes out again in the beginning, like he has the last 2 games, and Kyrie as well, and they start making shots early and they're stringing them together in this tandem attack mode where their best 2 players are operating like that, I think it calms their entire team down in a situation like you're going to see tonight. I think they come out early and you do as much as you possibly can to ensure that Jaylen Brown gets Luka or Tatum gets Luka, and he doesn't get opportunities to shoot over guys from 12 to 18 feet with relatively easy shots. I think if you can force some misses early, you're going to feel this incredible amount of energy in that building, particularly with Kyrie struggling up there the first 2 games of the series. You know, and even yesterday, some of his sound I was surprised by because he's almost acknowledging that this is a thing with the Boston crowd, and he used the phrase self-doubt, overcoming self-doubt in that building. I just felt like, man, oh man, is he fueling this thing with like those words? Because like typically, even if you're feeling that, you don't even acknowledge that exists. You don't even talk about that, and yet here he was, like actually openly talking about that. So the best thing that Boston can do is clamp down early. And I'm not saying that those guys aren't good enough to make shots no matter how great the defense is. They are. I thought it was incredibly easy in game 4. It's just the way they came out. Luka got whatever he wanted. Kyrie, had dribble drives to the rim unimpeded on his finishes. It just felt easy for their 2 best players. That to me is an enormous part of the start of this game, because if Dallas gets out to another great start and they get an 8-10 point lead early and those 2 guys are playing well, certainly Boston has proven they can come back from that, and particularly at home. But in a game like this, it is so important that Dallas's guys settle in because of the amount of energy that's going to be in the building, because you know what that feels like when a team is about to close out, what that crowd is like, particularly in Boston. And so it's so important. I think the start and the tone you set defensively on Dallas and how hard they're working to get clean shots and make shots. And I think that's going to be a major difference between what you saw the other night and what you're about to see in game 5. I want to say one quick point on what I love the most about Dallas in Game 4. You're right. Much better at the point of attack. Not so easy, like on that first move, that first direction by a guy or even with a guy. And now you're bringing help, and that's where you force miscommunications because it's like scramble mode because it looks like a guy's got a direct line to the rim, and now all bets are off in terms of what you practice in your rotations. Now it's just like guys, you're hoping communicate well. And a lot of times you get two guys flooding to the ball, and then there's a kick out, and then you're chasing it, and you never catch up to it. I thought initially they were better, but the best part was they stayed active with their hands all the way through the penetration. They didn't do that in the previous games. They would get beat, and it was almost like they gave up, whoever the guy was, whether it was Luka or Kyrie or anybody else. They gave up as they were trailing behind. In this one, they stayed even. They kept raking as they're sliding laterally. They were contesting at the end of the play at the rim. It just felt like everything Boston did was muddled. It was in traffic. And they contributed to it. And Joe Mazzulla had some sound during the game that I thought was interesting. He said, "Hey, we're creating one advantage in shooting the ball. We're really good when we create multiple advantages on the same possession." I thought it was a great soundbite, but they never got to that. Some of that's Dallas, some of that's Boston. The combination of the two things gave Dallas by far their best defensive performance. Now we see how close can they come to replicating that and staying alive in a Game 5.
Yeah, and the other thing that Joe, he talks about this is he feels like their defense, Boston's defense, is at its best when their offense is playing well. Like he always talks about, like our offense has to help our defense. Like we have to get good shots, we have to take care of the basketball. I think some of the just like the throw aheads to a straight line drive off of a miss, right? The get ahead pass to a straight line drive, the straight line drives in the half court. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this, where, I have said this, and I feel like you've sort of felt the same way, and a number of people have, is that like Kristaps Porzingis has been sort of the ultimate cheat code and difference maker, because he just gives them something they haven't had before, to that level where he can stretch, post mismatches, score efficiently, and protect the rim. Number one in the NBA this season in terms of field goal percentage allowed as the contesting defender in the paint. I think they miss him, man. I think they miss him.
Oh yeah.
And I there's no indication that, he's going to play, as far as I know. There has to be an element, in my opinion, there has to be an element tonight where it's just like, all right, Al, you got to play 40. Jayson, you got to play 45. Jaylen, you got to play 45. Like they've got to maintain the right matchups, not concede switches against weaker. Like,
yeah,
I really they have to go for it tonight, is what I'm saying. I think we get into the psychology of this, where if Dallas can will this one out, and all of a sudden you're going back to Dallas, it's a tough. We've been there. It's a tough sort of mental grind to be going back. Now all of a sudden the pressure's on you. The pressure's always going to be on Dallas from here on out, because they are literally in an elimination game every game, whether it's tonight, Game 6, Game 7. But I think there is a little more pressure now building for Boston.
Hey, it starts to squeeze you a little bit when you've been this close with this group. And I know they got some new pieces, but I'm talking about Tatum and Brown in particular. Like they've been there this many times, this close, 3-0, okay, 3-1. All right. We they almost chalked that up to that was just an anomaly. That's not who we are. They got us. They're a good team. They were going to get one. Okay, let's go home and end this and get serious about it. And if that doesn't happen, like, you're 2/3 of the way through the game and you haven't corralled this thing yet, that's when it starts to squeeze you a little bit, right? And what this could potentially mean, like going forward. So now you're not going to let your mind get there now. This is what Dallas has to do, right? It is imperative. And I keep waiting for this. I said it to you right before we came on. Like, one of the reasons I liked Dallas a lot in this series, to be competitive, certainly, maybe win the series, is that they were going to be in situations where it is literally, coming out of the under 3 timeout and it's tied or it's a 1-point game. And I have so much faith in Luka in those situations and navigating those and not feeling the pressure, not succumbing to that, and just making a big shot if he has to, or making a play, whatever needs to be made. Think about this series. We haven't gotten there. Game 1, Boston blasted them at the end of the first quarter when Porzingis came in, and then Dallas makes that run to cut it to 8. Luka hits a couple of threes, and he kind of nods at the crowd and winks a little bit, going to timeout, and then it was 20 coming out of that before you knew what happened. All right, game 2, they make that late run, which felt a little bit like, a Fugazi run. It didn't feel like Boston was really threatened. I didn't feel that way. That was a very bizarre ending to that game. Then you go to game 3. Luka is not on the court. We're in a 1-possession game, but Luka's not out there. He fouls out with 4.5 minutes to go, so we never saw that. And then, of course, game 4 is a blowout. So we haven't seen the scenario that I'm describing. And if that's what Dallas in this situation, that's the best they can hope for. I don't think you're going to see them railroad the Celtics. They're not going to come out and win this game by 15-20. If they win the game, it's going to be a tight game, and it's going to be late that they have to do it. So be in that position. Don't get hit with a barrage that takes you out of the position of making Boston feel the pressure of not closing and going back on the road again. Like, you've got to make them feel that, and that's what remains to be seen. And I'm sure Boston's going to come out with incredible energy at the start, and try to do everything they can to clamp down and make Dallas start doubting themselves and make Dallas feel the weight of what this means to come back from this, and the weight of that crowd and all of that. That's what's Boston's challenge is at the start of this game. I'm really curious to see how these two teams come out.
It should be noted, and I'm not disagreeing with the idea of what you're saying in terms of late game pressure and Dallas missing Luka because he fouled out at the end of game 3. It should be noted the Celtics are undefeated in clutch time games in this postseason with I believe for my game 4 notes, which I don't have in front of me, I think it's a plus 46.9 net rating in those minutes. So they have been really good when it is close at the end of playoff games.
But they haven't seen Luka yet.
But to your point, right. I totally understand what you're saying. The one guy for me that has just been awesome, well, there's been a bunch, but the one guy I want to just highlight for me, just because there's such a stark difference between game 1 of this series and the last 2 games of this series, and that's Dereck Lively. And this guy's coming off back-to-back double-doubles. He's been super impactful defensively. He's been super impactful on the glass. He made a corner 3. Like, I just, at 20 years old, to be in your rookie season and to bounce back, really, like that game 1, I was like, oh, I think the moment's a little overwhelming for him. I'm not saying he's can't play in this series. I didn't think that at all, but it just, he had some silly fouls and he didn't look great offensively. He had a defensive rebound where he slid his pivot foot by 3 feet and traveled. Like, it just didn't seem like Dereck Lively. And then these last 2 games, he's just been unbelievable. And I think particularly on the defensive end, where there's no Porzingis, right? There's no Porzingis. Like, this guy can be super impactful tonight.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And look, this was one of the things I loved about their team. Like, they had a 2-headed monster in the middle that, if you look at just their production they're giving you every night, basically you combine those guys into one center. Right? This is what you're getting out of the center spot. 23, 14, 3 blocks. Like, that was your average night for these 2 guys. These monster numbers. And the impact hasn't been there. Gafford, had the 1 game he played pretty well. Lively, quiet in a couple others. I thought the same thing. I didn't necessarily think, okay, he's a complete non-factor in the series, but it definitely looked uncomfortable in the beginning of this series. I felt the same way about Josh Green. I felt the same way about Kleber. They just weren't getting much at all out of those minutes. And it's too hard against a team like Boston you're talking like 50 minutes combined in a game and give you 5 points between those 3 players. You just can't do it. You can't survive that. You've got to have plays made. And so you look at the last game, 18 and 16. That's what they get from Lively and Gafford. Their presence was felt. They had 1 block between them, but they had a number of balls they tracked to the rim and forced misses by just their sheer energy and contest and getting off the ground. And and then let somebody else clean up the glass. They did a great job of that as well. It's a major impact for them. And let's see now if they can continue that, because this was the first game, JJ, that in this series where you felt like you saw the Mavericks in their totality. Like, this is the team that we watched for 3 rounds, the team that you watched last couple months of the season. And this was a pretty typical night of what it looked like. Luka and Kyrie doing their thing, great contributions out of their rim runners, 3-point shooting out of the role players, high-level defense, active, athletic. This is the first game they put it all together. And so now you ask yourself, okay, is this something that they have found in themselves that they think they're going to be able to continue and have this travel with them? Or was this more about Boston and their effort, energy level, concentration, commitment to their style? We're going to find out, man. We're going to find out when that ball goes in the air. I'm really curious. I mean, listen, I'm grateful we get more basketball. This would have been a very disappointing, sweep.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to a competitive series, a longer series. So at minimum, we get another game, and that's always good for everybody that loves the NBA.
All right. I'm going to ask you one last question, and that's just one key, the biggest key for Boston to close out this series, the biggest key for Dallas to keep this series alive.
I think the biggest key for Boston is to do a better job of indiscriminately switching onto Luka Doncic. I just don't think you can say, oh, that's how we play and that's what we're going to do. So he can go operate in the first half of the game against Al Horford and against Tillman if Porzingis isn't out there, and against Sam Hauser when he wants that matchup, and against Peyton Pritchard if he wants that one. No, it's got to be mostly Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Jayson Tatum. Like, these guys have to. And sometimes what that means, JJ, look, if you're screening at 25 feet on a ball screen, I get it. It's hard because Luka can just step back to 28 if you want to go under that and try to pick him up on the other side. And that's a makeable shot. If he's getting a ball screen when he's not looking to attack at 35 feet from the basket, makes no sense to hand him off to an inferior defender and let him go work that guy. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's what Boston did in this game. So I think the key is early, their defensive intent, how they are doing everything they can to make sure they've got the advantage defensively, because that was not the case in game 4. Luka was the maestro, orchestrating everything, getting what he wanted all the time. Can't let him do that. They've got to be better on him, particularly at the start of the game. So I'm looking for Boston's defense to set the tone for them, because their offense is in large part a byproduct of that. Their defense gets them going, and they can play a little bit sooner and faster up the floor, and they get you into pretty quickly downhill situations where now they love walking into the trail 3, or they walk the second pass, weak side 3 after they've gotten penetration early. All of that's triggered by getting stops and making Dallas feel your pressure. They didn't do that in game 4. That's what I'm looking for at the start of this game. I think that is critical. I think for Dallas, they have to get timely contributions out of these other guys the way they did the other night. I expect Luka and Kyrie to be really good in this game overall. They might not shoot 50%, but they're going to I just have faith in both of those guys. They're going to play well. They're that talented. Are you going to get similar contributions out of Lively, out of Dante Exum, who played great the other night? Derek Jones is going to get 3 naked threes in the first half that are timely. Maybe you're down 6. Can you hit that 3 to keep it a 3-point game, or are you going to miss it? Now it's 8 or 9 going the other way. These are the kinds of little plays that you lose sight of them in the highlight or when you're talking about the game after. But I'm always taking notes on stuff like that because it's an unguarded shot and they lived with it and you didn't make them pay. I'm looking for stuff like that. Their role players, to me, are what's going to carry the day here. It's not going to be about Luka and Kyrie. I think they're both going to play very well. At the end of the day, if they go 8 for 38 from the 3, and these guys can't knock down some of these open looks, or you're just getting literally nothing out of Lively and Gafford, no pressure on them at the rim, Dallas can't win the game. So I'm looking at Dallas's collection of role players and their contributions and how comfortable they look in this setting.
Good stuff. Always good to see you, my man.
Yeah,
and it should be a good one tonight. This has been the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler, brought to you by Dick's Sporting Goods.